Now there's one group that is not there, and that is the legislators, the government. But that's because the government is sort of above everything, and in our perception could not be seen as stakeholders like the others. But there are definitely roles for a government to have. I noticed that in your strategy that the minister was presenting briefly yesterday, that you have an emphasis also on the application of HTA, and I congratulate you on that. So we actually did some work in the European network about capacity building, because this is a challenge in this country for HTA. I noticed that there was this Twitter saying that currently the human resources for HTA in this country is consisting of one person. And so obviously this country also has a capacity building challenge. Let me just say, by the way, that individual, Mirjana Huig, is actually the elected chairman of our plenary assembly in UNETA, so she actually holds a high elected position within the European HTA community. And I hope there will be more people to work with her. So I move on and go into this study, which was made, simply a survey among more than 20 countries, HTA institutions, and then some expert work on how could strategies for national capacity building be furthered. And I'll give you some of the results from that. It's important to get agreement among the stakeholders about the process of developing capacity for HTA. And I guess that is also a challenge in this country. It's very important that there is not necessarily a consensus, but bringing together the stakeholders in this process. And it will need to bring in several important players, including the patient representatives and, again, the health insurance. So there is a need in a strategic process to identify the supporters and the opponents regarding HTA organization and its role in the system. There's a need to constantly seek more support from decision makers, and also from the scientists and the clinicians who are going to contribute substantially to the actual work. It's important that legislation is following up to make sure that it's possible to start the processes and get them going in the country. And there also need to be principles from the start of declaring conflict of interest. It's not that people cannot have conflict of interest. People sometimes have difficulties not having conflict of interest if they're very involved in clinical research, for example. They may be asked to sit in advisory boards of companies, etc., that they actually find it's quite difficult to say no to. But the fact is that this should just be declared so that it's possible for those that collaborate with the individuals and use the results later to know that probably there might be some conflict of interest here, so that's probably why that individual was not asked to be the first author of that specific chapter. Gaining political interest. Traditionally, there may be some distrust between scientists and politicians, but once you get the things straightened out, who's doing what, it's actually possible to strengthen and develop trust. The scientists should not think that they could impose their conclusions on the political level. On the other hand, the political level should not expect that they would be able to bring their fingers into the actual research, which needs to be independent. You would, again, in my view, happily ask the political level, the policymakers, to influence with the stakeholders what kind of topics that you're addressing with your HTA. But once that the research starts, it should be left to the researchers to do it according to the best methodologies and international agreed methodologies. And then there should be a review of the results, both scientifically, but also in terms of its applicability in policy. So that's where the policymakers and the stakeholders come in again. Again, I see the Twitter is running constantly on the wall, and it's just reminding me, yes, if you want to have a process like that, this in a modern society, you need to use a number of different channels to further getting the political interest for doing the HTA. Funding is very often a problem, and it's not going to be easier in the coming years. But the HTA should be seen as an investment that can very easily lead to better decision-making and efficiency in the system that by far brings back the money invested. I think that is the experience that we see from countries like UK, from Netherlands and other countries. And then there is the issue of trained staff. In this country, I think it's important to establish alliances with different kinds of university departments and societies, etc., that can actually bring in people with the backgrounds necessary to do the work. It could be part-time employment of people from the clinical field or from universities who could go into a core staff of people doing the HTA. Much HTA can be done by working groups that is only buying in maybe a few weeks of precious clinician time to participate in the work. So the conclusions are from this study we did in UNETA that there need to be general guidelines for how best to develop capacity, and I think the report that you can find on the internet is giving that. We cannot prescribe for the single country how it should be done, but there are some common experiences that can be shared. And UNETA is happy to facilitate in the member states the application of HTA. So the next question is, why is it important that health professionals from different countries cooperate? And that is actually the background for the work that we do in this European network. This is a statistic from the planned and ongoing projects database that has been around for some years. And every 3 months it's updated with information on the planned and ongoing projects in the partner organizations. Only those organizations that feed information can actually also get the data out of this database. And as you can see in the far right corner, they're actually within so-called alert topics, that is topics where several are working at the same time. There are more than 300 similar projects by mid this year. So you can see that if you do data collection like this, it's quite obvious that many countries, organizations are addressing HTA on the same topics at the same time. So how can we work together then? Well, that's what we've been developing tools for and building trust for over the years since 2006. We need to know what the others are doing. We need to have the right timing. That is often not a problem because many new technologies are hitting the countries at the same time. We need to use the same templates. You could say we need to have some shared standards, and we need to use the same scientific language. Our work language is English. So in this network that has been around since 2006, 37 government nominated organizations participate from all member states except Luxembourg that do not have a designated entity to participate at this time. Croatia now from the 1st of October participates in full in this joint action as a government-nominated organization. The Institute for Quality and Accreditation participates with its unit for research and HTA. There's another thing that is facilitating this. There was a reference to the Cross-Border Healthcare Directive some moments ago before the lunch. Actually, it has an article that says that the community, that is the union, shall facilitate a voluntary network for HTA in Europe. So this is the ticket for this country to participate on the long run in European collaboration in HTA, simply because this directive is facilitating also creators participating in it. And what is written here in red is emphasizing what should be the characteristics of this kind of work. So again, this is not work that is going to impose specific healthcare solutions to creator, but it's going to facilitate collaboration. It's been a process that has been on its way for years, a combination of a political process leading to this directive, and then some scientific collaboration process that had been going on in the European network since 2006. So what should be the role of patients? This is the last question I'll address. I find that the patients should be involved in prioritization of what are the most important topics to apply HTA to, the scoping of the HTA in the concrete, specific example of each project. I think patients can be very useful in saying what should the HTA address, how broad should it be. Patients may also provide relevant input for the research, and they should definitely also be involved in commenting on draft reports. Again, not to do the research, but to interpret and see its usefulness. So what kind of HTA is appropriate for this country? I think you will need to find out that yourself. But what we can do is, with the models that we are developing in UNETA, we can make sure that when you do your local reporting here in Croatia, we will facilitate that the information that can be shared and is not context specific from other countries to a degree that it cannot be transmitted into your setting, that kind of information, so-called HTA core information, can be shared with you in your development of HTA. Thank you very much.
Izvolite.
Dear participants of the Innovative Health Initiative Congress, I'm honored to take part with you in this very important Congress, and I'm very grateful to the organizers of this opportunity to be one of the speakers today. For those of you whom I haven't met, I would like to introduce myself briefly. My name is Tatjana Rejic, and I have been announced to you as the president of the European Liver Patient Association, ELPA, and I will speak today primarily from a pan-European point of view. However, I would still like to introduce myself to you also as a president of Croatian Association of Treated and Ill with Hepatitis, Hepatos, and the Croatian Alliance of Hepatitis Patients. The topic of my speech is patients' expectations of future healthcare system, patient and citizen participation in healthcare systems. And I have also prepared a short PowerPoint presentation to complement it. I will primarily address the topic from the point of view of the president of an umbrella association of patients. So, social change is giving rise to new forms of civil engagement. Patients and citizens are increasingly demanding to be involved in decisions which affect them, and there are more and more ways to participate, be it individually or collectively. The ability to participate obliges patients and citizens to articulate their interests and thus contribute to the improvement of systems. Participation is meant to ensure citizen representation in the alignment of interests of all affected groups and thus to increase the legitimacy of the decisions being